Hello and welcome to Richard's Comics. On today's episode, I want to go over the books I've got in the last few weeks. We got some free comic books in here, we got some new comic books, and there's a couple back issues sprinkled in. So let's start with our first book. And our first book is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I believe this is the Saturday Morning Adventures through IDW. Next up, Umbrella Academy, Free Comic Book Day. Next book up is another Free Comic Book Day, The Uncanny Avengers. Next book up is Avengers Rage of Ultron. I actually picked this up a few days ago. It's a bigger book. It's got a couple different stories in it. Definitely looking forward to checking this out. Next book up comes from Dynamite. This is Disney Villains Maleficent, #1. Currently, Dynamite has a line of books that are focusing on the Disney villains. We have Maleficent here. There's also currently a series with Scar going on. Be curious to see what villains are going to do next. Next up is Superman #4 from the current volume. It's been a good run so far. Next up, Star Wars Darth Vader #34. Some of these books might be a little out of order. This is Spider-Man 2099 Dark Genesis #3. I believe this is the first appearance of Daredevil 2099. Next up is actually issue #2 of Spider-Man 2099 Dark Genesis. For those not reading this is actually the main story focus with Miguel O'Hara, who's Spider-Man 2099 fighting against Carnage. Switching publishers. This is Spawn #341. Going back to Marvel, we have Red Goblin #4. Kind of a battle between Norman Osborn and his son, and his grandson, actually, Normie Osborn. Next up, this is Predator #3. This is actually from Marvel, but it does carry the 20th Century Fox banner on the top of it. Next up is Miracle Man, the Silver Age, #5. This is actually the last issue. I plan on getting this for a while. I actually dropped it. I found the story to be a little boring and not really knowing what's going. I kind of lost interest with this title. Back to Image. Gunslinger Spawn #20. Very good book so far. Probably the best Spawn title going on right now, and they're all really solid. Next up, Extreme Venomverse #1. This is a lead-in series to the upcoming event, The Death of the Venomverse. Next up, probably the best book on that DC's putting out right now. This is Batman and Superman World's Finest #15. Have a crossover with Metamorpho. Okay, let's go through some more. This is Animal Castle, Volume 2, Free Comic Book Day edition. This is actually the same cover, but this is actually issue 1 of Volume 2 of Animal Castle. Animal Castle is sort of like George Orwell's Animal Farm. The good thing about this book is the same people who are doing the cover, they also do the interior art, and the writing has been very solid so far. I definitely recommend this book. Next up, Free Comic Book Day, The Sacrificers #1 from Image Comics. Next up, Power Rangers Ranger Academy, Free Comic Book Day from Boom. Next up from Tokyo Pop is a prequel to The Nightmare Before Christmas, talking about how Jack actually got the title of the Pumpkin King between him and Oogie. Next up, kind of an 80s throwback, Mad Balls versus Garbage Pail Kids, free comic book day edition. I actually just read this one. This was very good. I'm looking forward to this. This is Dawn of DC Night Terrors. Kind of a horror kind of a story. It's a little bit different for a major publisher, but it's sort of like their main heroes actually fighting a character called Insomnia. Looks pretty interesting. It looks like it's a little bit of a trip through the nightmare realm for the DC characters. Next up is the Franzetta-verse, free comic book day. Those familiar with Frank Franzetta's art, the Death Dealer is one of the main characters in this book. Next up is a book about Stan Lee called I Am Stan, free comic book day edition. Kind of goes back and goes through the early days of when he worked for Marvel. Next book from Titan, Conan the Barbarian, free comic book day. As we know, Conan's probably most famous for his runs under Marvel and Dark Horse. This is now Titan's chance to give Conan a try. The art was very good, solid storytelling. They really nailed the character. Might have to check out the main series when it comes out. Next up from IDW, Star Trek, Day of Blood Prelude. That's going to be running through IDW Star Trek, mainly Star Trek and Star Trek Defiant. Another free comic book, Star Wars High Adventures, also has a backup story with Avatar, The Last Airbender from Dark Horse. Next up is Spider-Man and Venom, free comic book day from Marvel. We're going to jump over to Valiant real quick. This is the Shadow Man free comic book day, backup story and kind of a preview of X-O Manowar the Unconquered. From Dynamite, Red Sonja, free comic book day. It has a new story talking about the upcoming volume of Red Sonja. Additionally, it also has a reprint of a classic Red Sonja tale back when Marvel had the imprint. Next up is kind of a book that I have to admit I didn't really like this book at all. This was Amazing Spider-Man number 25, Legacy 919. This basically talks about what happened to Mary Jane, why she was trapped in that other dimension with Paul. Peter's trying to get back to her. Basically, I think that this is probably the most out of character and poorly constructed story I've read in Spider-Man in a very, very long time. Unfortunately, I'm a diehard Spider-Man fan, and I'm really just getting it so I don't have a gap in my collection. Next book up is actually Amazing Spider-Man 25, same book, but actually the Scotty Young variant cover. Now we're going to go to DC real quick. This is Batman Incorporated, number 8. This is the first appearance of Joker Incorporated. I alluded to this earlier. This is Disney Villains, Scar, number 2. This serves as this current issue actually is going concurrently with the Lion King movie. Kind of more focuses obviously on Scar versus Mufasa and Simba. Next up, Dawn of DC, Green Lantern number 1. I really enjoyed this book. It was a nice kickback to how Green Lantern used to be. Remind me some of the Jeff Johns run, but actually maybe even the Silver Age, because it just seems very bright and hopeful. I really like this book. Next up, this is another detour to Dynamite. This is King Kong, The Great War, number 1, set during World War I. Some soldiers getting marooned on Skull Island. It was an interesting story. Okay. Next up, this is really a cover buy, but I actually find myself enjoying this story. This is Superman Lost, number 2. For those familiar with this limited series, Superman is basically lost in the universe for, I believe it's 20 years. And meanwhile on Earth, almost no time has passed at all. So this really is chronicling how Superman is dealing with being back on Earth after being gone for so long. It's an interesting tale. The art is good. And unlike The Amazing Spider-Man, Superman is actually written in character. Next up is Superboy, The Man of Tomorrow, #1. This was okay. This actually takes place prior to the current Metallo storyline going on in Action Comics. Decent book, fun little read, kind of a throwback to the old 90s series. This was good. This was Star Wars Yoda #7. This is actually a new story arc. It's got him, he has a short fight with General Grievous. I enjoyed this book. I'm liking this new story. I was going to drop this book after the previous volume being kind of boring, but this current volume, I think it's got a lot of potential. Next up is a facsimile. This is Warlock. Actually, it's Strange Tales featuring Warlock. Strange Tales #178. Kind of a follow-up to Warlock's early appearances and through stories like Thor and Incredible Hulk. This is actually mainly a solo Warlock. I think it's actually his first solo story. Pretty good, and kind of helps usher him in back to the Infinity Gauntlet age and some of the Silver Surfer titles from the early 90s. So I did enjoy this book. I would recommend it. Next up, we talked about a little bit ago with Superboy. This is Action Comics #1054. It's a nice battle between Superman and Metallo. Next up, this is Alien #1. This has been relaunched. I believe this is the 3rd volume under Marvel. It carries a 20th Century Fox logo. Next up, Batman #135, and I guess DC's getting on the legacy like Marvel. This is Legacy #900. Pretty much, if there is a version of Batman through any sort of media, cartoon, movies, different comic book eras, TV shows, they show up in this book. This is a fun journey, and if you're a Batman fan of pretty much any of his different incarnations, you're going to like this book. Okay, next up, this is Batman and the Joker, The Deadly Duo, Book 7. This is written and drawn by Marc Silvestri. Very solid art. It was overall a very good series. It kind of stalled a little bit at the end, but I think the art and the fact that the characters are actually written the way the characters are supposed to be written. Batman acts like Batman, Joker acts like Joker, Jim Gordon. Very well done miniseries overall. I was quite happy with this. I'd like to see Marc Silvestri take on some other DC characters besides Batman. Maybe he could try Superman as well. Next up, this was a very fun book as well. This is Carnage Reigns Alpha. For fans of Maximum Carnage and more recently Absolute Carnage, this book is definitely for you. Pretty much it's a big game of cat and mouse between Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and also Cletus Cassidy. Also has kind of a new angle to the character of the Scorpion, Matt Gargan. Next up, this kind of ties into this. This is called Cult of Carnage Misery. This actually focuses a lot on Liz Allen, and it's a new character in the book. I don't want to spoil it too much, but if you're enjoying the symbiotes going on in Marvel right now, probably should check it out. Next up is Darkwing Duck #3. If you like the 1990s cartoon series, both the cover, the interior art, and the way the characters are written, it's sort of like a new season of Darkwing Duck. So if you like Darkwing Duck, it's an all ages appropriate title. It's got some humor in it. It's got just enough action for you. It's a well done book. I will say that Dynamite is really doing a good job with the Disney properties right now. Okay, next up is Detective Comics 1071. I've been reading this comic, and I really do not have a very good idea what's going on. It's a very confusing book. I like the art in it, even though it's a little dark, but it does go into like kind of this new family that's in Gotham who does not have very good intents and purposes for both Gotham or its people. Also, they've pretty much had a bullseye on Batman in the book. But aside from that, where this story is going, I really have no idea. But we'll stick with it. I always like to read detective. Next book up is Edge of Spider-Verse #1. I like this book more than I thought I would. The Spider-X who is basically Peter Parker, who is a dinosaur in this. It is actually, the humor in this book, I think, does a really good job. If you like the humor from the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, you would probably like the humor in this book. The second story about a character called Spider Killer, which I thought would be better, is actually by far the weaker portion of this book, in my opinion. Next up is Green Arrow #1, carrying that Dawn of DC banner like Green Lantern. So far, I have to give DC props. Both Green Lantern and now Green Arrow, very well done books. Got a lot of potential, good art, great characterization. This is what comic books should be. Okay, next up is, thankfully, the last issue of Hulk, issue 14, Legacy number 781. This is the climactic battle with Titan. It's also the end of this current volume of Hulk. This story went on way too long. I was very happy that it finally ended, but I didn't want a gap in the current volume, so I did stick it out to the end. But I will say this book definitely needs a new direction. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. This is Scorched, number 17. The team book from Spawn, really focusing on She-Spawn, Medieval Spawn, and some of the supporting characters. Overall, it's good. I don't think it's as good as the main Spawn book, and definitely not as good as the Gunslinger book, but it is still a solid title. Next up is Spider-Man number 8, Legacy number 164? Yes, 164. I thought it was 184. This is kind of following up on the end of the Spider-Verse storyline. Focuses more on Spider-Man trying to be able to help more people, and also talks more about the character introduced at the end of Spider-Man number 7, which was Spider-Boy. Next book up, you saw this third and second issue. Well, this is the first issue. Spider-Man 2099, Dark Genesis number 1. Only a few left. Star Wars number 34. For those who have been following that, you know that this takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Luke had basically lost the lightsaber that he was using, and now he is on the search for new kyber crystals to make a lightsaber of his own. And the last book we're going to talk about today, Star Wars Darth Vader number 33. And continuing the story from last issue, Vader is basically losing control of his force powers. They're very much, it's very chaotic. So this kind of focuses on that, and one of the handmaidens of Padme, Sabi, I might be saying her name wrong, she's there to help Vader. It's an interesting story. Not much dialogue. I think that was my only critique on this book, is I feel like you can basically get through the book in a couple minutes. There should have been some more dialogue. But the art is solid. I think Star Wars Darth Vader is by far, since Marvel took over Star Wars, the best overall Star Wars book that's on the stands is Star Wars Darth Vader. Okay, that is the last book. I appreciate all the time today. Know it was a long one. Hope you have a good day, and remember to read what you like. Bye-bye.